Hey there! Today we're going to do a short one, which is a CSS only photo grid masonry style. We'll be using just HTML and CSS, and we're going to make our photo gallery have different photo sizes that seem random. Also, we'll be incorporating some shadows and rotation to make it all seem like a table of photographs just spread around. The code is available for you all at my CodePen, so I will link to it in the description. And now let's make a photo gallery. Okay, I'm in CodePen, and as you can see, I have set the HTML preprocessor to pug. You'll see why I did that in a minute. And the preprocessor, the CSS preprocessor to SCSS. This is why I use pug at the moment. I'm not so fond of pug, but in this case, where I want to create 48 divs, it's very convenient that I can use a while loop. So let's just use pug here. This will tell pug to create a div with a class of grid, and I use it here too. So this will create a div with a class of photo. This is the variables I'm using. We'll set the n variable to 0, and then while n is smaller than 48, we'll be rendering this div, and in the end we increase the n property so that it loops from 0 to 47. This will generate HTML that looks like this. The div we create here has a style property with a background image in it. And we'll be using images from Lorem Pixum, which has this very convenient URL string with which you can get random pictures of, in this case, 400 width, 300 height. We'll set the random parameter to our n variable so that we actually have random pictures. You see nothing here because this is just a div being rendered. And, it has a background image, but it has no width or height. So it is there, you just don't see it. To make them visible, let's first tackle some body properties. Have this nice warm gray. Now let's tackle the outer div, which has a class of grid. Obviously, we use the grid display and we set the grid template columns to this complex combination of functions. We make our photos a minimum of 200 pixels wide and a maximum of 1 fraction. This will say to the browser that every column that is in there should have the same width with a minimum of 200 pixels. And I say every column that is in there because we use the autofit property in the repeat function. Autofit will do as it says. It will autofit columns in the width of the grid, and if it doesn't fit, it will continue on the next row. The rows are specified to be 200 pixels high, so that's why these photos are square. 200 pixels width minimum, 200 pixels high. You can see if I change this, the rows will be 120 pixels. So it's up to you what sizes your photos will be. I have the grid gap set to 1.5 ems. So we have some spacing between the photos. And there's this grid autoflow property, which is set to dense. I'll show you in a minute what this does. It makes sure there are no gaps in our grid. First of all, these pictures are now not showing fully. That's because we need to set our background size for the photos to cover our position to center. And I always set a border radius to 1 pixel for photos so that you don't have these sharp corners. We can also make them a bit more photo-like by setting a border and a box shadow. This is already starting to look like a photo gallery. Now, for the variations, I'd like to make a wide variation And I'd like to have every 7th photo to be a wide photo. I'll use the nth child selector, and you can put a number in here. Now this would make the 7th photo a wide variation. Let's just do that for now. We set the grid column to span 2 photographs. And you'll see that the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th photo is now a wide photo. This is cool, but what if there were so many more photos and I wanted every 7th to be a wide variation? That's very easy. You just put an N here, and now it's every 7th photo, as you can see. Now, if I turn the grid auto flow off now, you'll see that we have some gaps here. That's because the 7th photo, the second 7th photo, wouldn't fit in here. So the grid will conveniently put this on the next row. But since we don't want any gaps, we set the grid auto flow to dense, and then another photo which will fit is going to take its place. So let's make a tall variation then. Let's do the nth child every 11th child and set the grid row to span 2. And voila, we have a portrait variation on every 11th photograph. This is the end of the list. And let's also, while we are here, create a big variation. Let's do every 17th child to have both grid column and grid row set to span 2, which will create a big picture. Cool. Now we want to have random rotation because our photos got thrown on the table and every photo has a bit of rotation. Now we can do random in SCSS, but as you can see, this would be the same amount of randomness for every photo. So we have to change this a little bit. This would mean a random of 4 degrees. And since we start with -2 degrees, it can be in the range of -2 to +2 degrees. But for every photo. So what do? In SCSS, we can create a loop around this. And this is done like this. I'll just start a loop here for I variable loops from 1 to 11. I want 11 random transformations. And let's close this up. And this does nothing, obviously. This just puts in 11 transforms. We can see in the compiled CSS that this will have the 11 transforms, and obviously only the last one will be visible. So we have to do another thing, and that is use the nth child selector again. Because for every 11th child, and now we going to do something here, +1, this will have this transformation. What does this mean? This means for every 11th child starting at the first position, this will have a rotation of this value. If I'd made this a 2, it would say for every 11th child starting at the second item, it would have this transformation. So we have to now put this variable in here, and then for the situation that I is 1, every 11th child starting at 1 will have a rotation. And for the situation that I is 2, every 11th child starting at the second item gets a different rotation. So the way to do this is to use the pound selector and put the variable in here. So now every photo will have a different rotation. Every 11th photo starting at 1 will have a different rotation from every 11th photo starting at 2. And as you can see, all the photos now have random rotation. Or actually, not all the photos have random rotation, but because every 11th photo has a different random rotation, it looks to be random. Now, let's say we want some overlapping. Make our borders a bit bigger. What I'll do is I'll just remove the grid gap so the photos are aligned. Now with the rotation, you already see a bit of overlapping. We could do some more by just giving them more rotation. But we can also up the scale a bit. So let's give it 2% more scale. So now all the photos are overlapping. But because they are laid out in this order, the latest photo is on top and the bottom photo is at the bottom. We can have some randomness in there as well. And the way to do that while we're here is change the z-index. Let's make this a 100 plus a random value of 100. And now you'll see that some of these lie on top of other ones that are later in the order. So this is actually now randomly overlapping. So there you have it. A CSS only masonry style photo grid.